Hey, so, a bunch of random facts. Well, maybe. There might be a point in here somewhere. Did you ever play that game, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? Did you know that Chrystia Freeland's grandpa was actually a Nazi with only 3 degrees of separation from the big kahuna, Adolf himself? Did you know that she's affiliated with the WEF, and that the person that runs that, the head of the WEF, is a guy called Klaus Schwab, whose dad was actually a Nazi too, Eugen Schwab, who's actually where the word eugenics comes from? In case you didn't already know, eugenics is the practice of selective breeding, basically applying what we did to dogs and other domesticated animals to the human race, and it usually involves liberal use of genocide to get there. Liberal use of genocide to get there. You know, on the way to a better world, you gotta get rid of all the useless people, right? The genes that you don't want quite as much as the ones that you do. Hey, speaking of eugenics, did you know that Bill Gates is a 3rd-generation eugenicist? yeah, apparently his dad and his grandpa were really into it too. Yeah, when you start looking into these people, it seems like there are various different things that are tying them together. Things like eugenics, one-world governments, digital currencies, transhumanism, and internalized surveillance, the WEF. Yeah, you know the WEF, right? The World Economic Forum. It's this weird globalist organization that's planted operatives, basically, into the governments and various positions of influence around the world. A bunch of rich people, philanthropists, they all seem to have memberships in it. It's basically like a real-world Hydra. You know, especially with the whole connection to World War II and the Nazis. Do you remember that time that blackface Hitler was trending on Twitter on account of the many times that Justin Trudeau has dressed up in blackface or Nazi paraphernalia? Hey, did you ever see that video where Klaus Schwab is actually bragging about how he's planted his young leaders into different governments around the world, and in particular how he's penetrated the Canadian cabinet with about half of its members? Hey, did you know that the fascists aren't the people breaking the rules and the rebels aren't usually the ones enforcing them? Hey, did you remember that time that the Liberals hired a vocal anti-Semite to run their anti-racism division? Speaking of weird connections to Nazis, remember that time Omar invited a Holocaust denier to some liberal event? What? Hey, do you remember that time that Trudeau accused a member of the opposition of, quote, standing with a swastika, but he made the mistake of accusing a member of the opposition that happened to be Jewish? So that was dumb. Hey, you know, Ukraine? Yeah, that little country that's having that border dispute with Russia. Do you know that it's actually a notoriously corrupt country, known for money laundering, human trafficking, illegal biolabs, like a whole bunch of shady shit? Yeah, do you know like countries all over the world are sending this place money? No questions asked, and endorsed by a 24/7 international media campaign. Visited and celebrated by politicians and celebrities alike. They threw a U2 concert there, in the middle of a supposed war zone. Yeah, JT flew over with his kids, in the middle of a war zone, to watch a U2 concert. And you're an asshole if you ask questions. Yeah, you know the place. You've been hearing a lot about it lately. It's all over TV and shit. It has been the center of attention for a little over a year now. There's a lot going on over there. And in the midst of it all, they are really hoping that we forget that up until just a few years ago, everybody in the news was reporting on the fact that Ukraine had a government-affiliated neo-Nazi militia known as the Azov Battalion. Neo-Nazi militia? Did you know that if you mention the Azov Battalion on Twitter, you will get sworn by at least a dozen faceless people that are really mad at you for bringing it up? They will go from saying that they don't exist, to they've reformed, to one guy actually told me they were the last hope against the Jews. Did you know there's actually a group of people that have come together with the specific purpose of diminishing the existence of Azov in Ukraine? Yeah, when you bring it up, they start to call you stuff like a vatnik, which I had to look it up, but it actually means something like the ball sucker of Russia. Often, when you mention the Azov Nazis, the first thing they'll do is mention that there might be Nazis in Russia, and perhaps in various countries around the world, conveniently leaving out the fact that those Nazis aren't being sent billions of dollars by governments all over the world. You know, for the record, not overtly supporting Ukraine doesn't automatically mean an allegiance to Russia. I don't actually give a shit particularly about either side of that conflict. My allegiance is to Canada, and my sympathies go to the innocent citizens that are caught in the middle of that big mess over there. Hey, did you know that in World War II, Ukraine was one of the few countries over there that was just all for it when Germany decided they were taking everything over? They're like, yeah, man, we're into your shit. And they still celebrate certain people from, like, the Nazi days, even today. There's, like, national holidays. I guess some news company got kicked out of the country because they accidentally filmed a bunch of citizens giving the old "Her" salute. Celebrating some shit that happened over there. Hey, do you remember that time that Chrystia Freeland was photographed holding like a neo-Nazi banner at some pro-Ukraine thing, and then she played it off like she didn't understand what was on the banner, she didn't speak Ukrainian, but then like a couple months later she was on TV giving a speech in like fluent Ukrainian, casting a little bit of doubt on her previous statement? Hey, do you remember that time a few years ago where Catherine McKenna was paraphrasing Hitler's main propagandist, Goebbels, when she was talking about, if you repeat a lie often enough and repeatedly, eventually people will accept it as the truth? Oh, while we're talking about paraphrasing Nazis, here's a really good one. Do you remember when JT paraphrased Adolf himself, talking about how these people take up space and, asking the question of whether we tolerate them? Hey, do you remember way back during the Ottawa convoy and the whole protest and everything, where the Liberals were trying to accuse those people of being like racists and misogynists, white supremacists? Do you remember all the noise that was being made all over social media and on the mainstream news about that guy at the Ottawa convoy that was walking around with a racist flag? But then it later came out that he was actually a Liberal employee and that the guy following him around taking pictures was one of the JT's official photographers. You know, it's really kind of weird to think that the people that were trying to force segregation, they're trying to coerce medical procedure, they were refusing medical treatment, and they're still refusing organ transplants. They're trying to remove basic rights and freedoms just for non-compliance. They're freezing bank accounts. They built isolation centers. I mean, we know what those really are, but they built isolation centers across the country. I remember seeing last year a thing where somebody had gotten a screen grab where the Canadian government had ordered a bunch of electronically activated guillotines for some reason. The people that seem to be playing a long game of divide and conquer, they want everybody separated into their little boxes when it comes to your race, your gender, your sexuality, your ethnicity, pretty much everything about you that can separate you from everyone else on this planet, they want you in that box. The people that apparently have euthanasia as a rising cause of death in this country in all age groups, they have little pamphlets and coloring books that they want to give kids as young as 12. They are pushing it now for the mentally ill, which last I checked, you don't agree with someone that's suicidal, that it's a good idea. Oh, and since we're on that topic, did you know that they're trying to color vaccine hesitancy as a mental illness? Yeah, these are the same people that for the last 3 years that have been saying that anybody that was against it, when that was against their policies or their obvious agenda, were fascist Nazis. Did you know that accusing other people of doing what you're doing as you're doing it is a Marxist tactic to cause confusion? Well, now you know that and a bunch of other shit too.